Well, hey there, old friend.
Hey.
How you been doing?
Yeah,
Deb,
good to see you. Good to
it-
see you.
it's
Well,
wonderful to see you.
yeah.
Yeah. So I gather we are assembled here to do some reminiscing together about the old days into the new days and all of that. I was thinking recently about how and when we met. What's your recollection?
I don't remember that very first moment, but you were already at Aikikai when I got there. And I do remember that actually I noticed you because your speech had a very slight deaf cadence. And because I have two deaf sisters, I immediately latched onto you, and we hit it off, and we had that in common. And I got there in '83 August, so I know you'd already been there for a while, and I know you came out of another martial art. So I was thinking how we came from really pretty different places. Uh, because I came from a really idealistic kind of background with my Alexander technique studies and people I'd met who were already doing Aikido. And I know you came out of Goju karate. So I actually was thinking, how you felt about coming to Aikikai, how you ended up there, and already being a high level martial artist, because I came as a very idealistic person who wanted to do something beautiful, not really a martial art kind of orientation. So I thought it'd be great to hear how you guys came over from Goju.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was I was a teenager when I was at the New York Goju Kai, and then some people there, Les Baum, Alan Lowe, Karen Ninnis, they had already started Aikido like in the late 70s, I think, and they would come to New York Goju Kai and show us these wild, weird wrist locks and things. And we're like, oh, wow, what is that? So I didn't start yet because I went off to college and I, was on that whole route. And I was still doing Goju-ryu through college. And then I was up in upstate New York. I was up in Saratoga Springs and Albany, in that area. And I started training. I was in a recreation center, I think, in Albany. And I came across a guy teaching Aikido there. And I started taking classes. And this was like in 80 or 81. And that's how I met Bonnie Vasey, because she was practicing there at the time. She was up in Albany. It wasn't Irvin Faust. It was a different guy who's no longer with us. And there's a whole story there, but I won't go. Anyway, but I ended up moving back, deciding to finally move back home to New York City to, pursue an acting career at that time. And found my way over to New York Aikikai because I decided, yeah, I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to continue on. And that was in 82, I think, 82. And yeah, you really zoomed right in because, I have very good hearing in my left ear, but no hearing in my right ear, virtually. I have some hearing in my right ear, but not good. And so, yeah, it does. And I've worked for many years to keep my voice forward and to work to hear that, because if I don't, it can recede easily. But I've worked on that. And so, but anyway, yeah, so here we were training and we identified. And as I recall, when Maya was really little, maybe she was 4 or 5 years old, I don't know how it all kind of came about, but we were actually roommates for a while. I think you two came over and stayed with me.
Yeah.
I was living way over on East 14th Street, like
You
can't see, right?
really took us in because we were kind of vagabonding around trying to get really a settled place in the city, and
Yeah.
you took us in. And but in terms of your speech, I don't think a lot of people were aware, but because
Right.
I grew up with my deaf siblings, I was super tuned in.
Yes, you were. I
I don't
appreciate
think
that.
I don't think other people were really aware of
Yeah,
anything in your speech, but I caught on. But
but you got it. Yeah, because
you hit it off, and
so
I
that's
think
great.
you were pretty fierce at that time, and I was notorious for crying and leaving the mat. And
Ah,
so I think you probably remember that, but
remember a
also
lot.
My daughter Maya, who grew up in the dojo, was like the little um, ambassador. I mean, she was very people oriented and
Yes, she
outgoing
was.
and knew everybody, and um, she got hold of you right away too.
We clicked right away, and I knew instantly that she was a very special kid, and I was so delighted, as the years went on, that she really had an affinity with Aikido, and then she really stuck with it all those years. But I remember things like, I remember some of the, back in the days when we were new, there were two different mats. There was the main mat, and then there was the beginner's mat that was on the other side of the wall. And so I remember having some really, really terrific early teachers, because there were people who really kind of almost specialized in beginners back then. It was like Kitty Cook and Pims and Steve Pimsler and Harvey. And so it was, but I remember it was this real rite of passage when we finally decided, okay, we can join the main class now. That was a huge thing. That was
Right,
a
but
really,
you see, when I got there, I think I got there right after they got rid of the beginner mat, because
that
there was
right?
only one mat. And when I
Okay.
started, those people were there.
Yeah.
But Nobu Arakawa took me my whole first week and taught me everything. And
Yes.
then at the end of the first week, all of a sudden, all these people came streaming in. They came back, they'd been at summer camp.
Oh,
I
wow.
had no idea, but my first week was very tranquil, very with Nobu, and then all of a sudden everybody came back, and it was crazy town, and it was wild. And it's funny you mentioned Kitty, because Kitty was one of the first people I remember. I asked her, oh Kitty, what does it mean, when we do this? And she
Yeah.
actually explained it to me. And then it wasn't so long after that that Kitty left Aikido, and
Yes.
I couldn't believe it, because she moved away to be with her horse. And
Isn't
funny
that?
thing that eventually I got a horse, and
Yes.
I didn't have to leave Aikido for my horse, but it was just so funny to me that I look back and I remember when she did that, I thought, how could she ever give up Aikido for a horse? And what does that mean? And then,
Isn't that funny how that?
but the person who really caught my eye and my heart was Sibylla. Sibylla,
Oh,
because I
yeah.
used to come early every day. I came early
Yeah.
just to watch her train.
Oh my
And
gosh, yes.
I thought she was just, and she was brilliant and
She was
fierce and beautiful. And
all of
uh,
that. And you both were, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thanks for putting her back in mind. That makes a lot of sense to me, because you were both tall and lean, and she
oh,
was
but not like
ferocious.
her.
She
I
was, well,
mean,
she was like exceptionally tall. But I mean, it makes a kind of sense to me, from my perspective.
well,
I
thank
can
you.
see
But
why you have that affinity, because she was ferocious, and just with this really solid, clean, um, formidable grace, is how I would describe it. And
that's
so,
a great way to say it. Yeah.
yeah, who caught my eye. We're talking about the people that caught. So the dynamic duo, of course, was Chris and Gina, because
Right.
they came up pretty much together, I think, and they were shodans when I started. When we started, they were shodans, I think. So they were like the dynamic duo. I took a lot of classes with them, because I think they were both teaching classes at the time, and did seem to be very attentive to all of us newbies back then. And in particular, Chris Vargan really took me under her wing. And she was just also very attuned in some way and just really, really sensitive to me, and not just to me, I mean, but to those of us who were just trying to make our way and find our way through how to make all of this make a kind of sense in our very different bodies and who we all were, and how to find out our Aikido grammar, I guess you might say.
Yeah,
And
Chris was there. Chris was there, but the
yeah.
funny part of this story is that when I started, Gina was off taking quite a long break. I think
Yeah.
she was doing a restaurant, not as,
Oh,
but she was off. She
yeah,
wasn't there at all. And then like
yeah, that's
maybe a
true.
year after I started, this woman comes into the dojo like I'd never seen her, like she owns the place, which,
Well,
and that was Gina. So I had not
very
met Gina,
familiar.
but then yeah, Chris, Gina, Sibylla, and Karen
Right.
Ninnis,
And Karen,
Harmony, Harmony
yes,
Hammond.
Harmony, of course, the artist,
um,
Harmony Hammond. Yeah,
So
yeah,
we were
there was
so
a
lucky.
lot of women,
We had a lot of strong women.
strong women who were
Then we
really,
had all those really scary, wild men, like bless
yeah,
his
there were a number of
bless
them.
his soul. We lost him this year. Frank Johnson used to
Oh,
terrify me. And
I
Dr. Mike Schloss,
really,
we also lost him recently.
oh, Mike,
Used to
oh,
terrify me. So
wow,
my main impression there was it was so beautiful, and I knew I wanted to do it, and I
yeah,
wasn't gonna not stay and get it, but
yeah,
I think quite honestly, I kind of ended up in the wrong field. I mean,
cohort.
wrong dojo. I mean, I was more cut out for maybe kinder, gentler key society.
Oh, I see what you
I
mean.
mean,
Yeah.
because all the people I knew from Alexander Technique had come up through, actually, they came up through Saitomi Sensei, but
Okay.
um, I was just so idealistic. And then here I was in the School of Hard Knocks. And I'm so glad, though, that I stuck it out and stayed through it.
and we
Because
were,
in
oh,
yeah,
I'm
later
sorry, Deb, go
years,
ahead, go
well,
ahead.
no, just I'm thinking later years, I did some friendship seminars teaching through different federations. And
Oh,
they have a lot of, and a little bit of training at some other
places, other dojos and stuff.
places that, thank goodness, Yamada Sensei gives his blessing for us to do some of this. But basically, I think they have a lot to offer in terms of the sensitivity and
Mhm.
certain aspects of training. But I'm just always so glad that I went through the School of Hard Knocks, and
Yeah,
I went through all the physicality.
yeah.
And I don't think you can skip. You can't really skip
No, right. You
into
even though
that. Yeah.
but we also did find we found our affinities too. We found our cohorts, like
Yeah.
people that we really, like Laura Jacobs was one, was a part of I think she started a little ahead of me. She was already on the beginners mat taking beginner classes when I came in, and but we just all became buddies. And then when you came in, there was a whole group of us, but we seemed to learn how also in that hard knocks environment, because it was just so wild and crazy and varied in terms of styles and temperaments and all that kind of stuff. But you did the survival skills that we developed in terms of gravitating toward who we wanted to learn from, and who maybe it wasn't as safe or wasn't our kind of, you developed that musculature, you developed that sensibility as you went. And so I would eyeball the lines of people when I would come in and bow in and everything. I would sort of see who was there, and I learned to feel where I was going to go, and I protected myself as best I could that way,
I think
and
it
learned
took
a lot.
I think it took me a little longer to understand that every black belt who was, especially a man who was going to boss me around, I didn't always have to take it to heart.
Yeah, right.
It took me a little longer too, maybe. But yeah, I trained a lot with Laura, definitely a lot with you and
Yeah,
Laura, and
that's right.
we
No,
had our
our fabulous cohort of folks and stuff. And and then of course as time went on, we advanced. I think great, in terms of the whole, the hard of hearing thing. For me, what a really great story was when I went to take my Shodan test in '88. were you at that summer camp, Deb? I can't remember if you were able to go, but I think it was when it was still at the Roger Williams College, I think it was up in Rhode Island, I want to say. And
Yeah.
so that year, interestingly enough, I mean, there's more to this story, but I won't go into all of that. But what I remember is that Sensei, talk about somebody, who's attuned, he assigned me, and because I was dreading it for reasons I won't elaborate, but he assigned me an uke, and it was the late great amazing Sue Hall. And we had been, but Sue and I had just connected, we're both lesbians, and so we had connected. And I just adored her, and her style and sensibility couldn't have been more different from ours, because she was from Boston. But I just adored her from the first, because she had a hardiness to her that was, I just felt like, yeah, that's somebody who's a survivor, like I was a survivor through the rough and tumble of New York City and stuff, and she had the rough and tumble of Boston. So we just clicked right away. And I can't even remember when, but it was well before that. And then Sensei put us together, and my Shodan test, thanks to her, because she really was my ears, because I was in a panic. And I think he understood, because he also knew that I had a hearing issue. And when I'm in huge spaces like that was like a huge gymnasium, I'm lost a lot of the time, because the sound disperses and I just can't make it. So she was fantastic, because she would just relay every command to me really quickly, and it was just wonderful supporter, and and then eventually a kind of remote mentor of sorts, even though Boston Aikido people were really different than what we did, but we just always would have these reunions and seminars and everything, and connect. But that was a great example of when Yamato Sensei's attunement to things really clicked, and it was
That doesn't
I'm so
surprise
proud.
me. That does not surprise me, but did you know that he knew that you and Sue were friends, or it kind of for you came out of the blue? Like, how did he know to do that?
Yeah, because I didn't know that he had any idea about that. And he must have, figured it out, because, we were all, when we went to seminars and things, you talk and hang with your buddies. We would practice together and stuff. And, so I'm sure he's an observant man, and I'm sure he had assessed that. And
Yes.
no, it's really true.
People think he might not be paying attention, but
this was a glorious moment, because it saved me from a number of things that I was very worried about on that day. And it turned into a memorable test. Nidon was different, but anyway, yeah, tell me, I didn't mean to.
Well, this is going to sound really weird, but people who've been around Yamada Sensei long enough probably have similar experiences that I'm not going to call it psychic, but he is so tuned in on a different level. And this is very kind of not a weird story, but our dear friend Karen Snyder.
Oh, yes.
So Karen had been dealing with some injuries, and she had actually been doing some training at Bond Street Dojo. And she came and because she had these injuries, she needed to be super careful, and she thought maybe this would be, a good, quiet, easier, and it was going pretty well. And then one day she came to me and she said, I'm so confused. They had this teacher, and we're doing Ikkyo, and I forget what he told her, but she's like, I don't get that. So I'm like, we have to get her back to New York Aikikai. So we go back to New York Aikikai. She comes to the first class back at Aikikai, and she's training with me. And we're sitting in Yamada Sensei's teaching. We're sitting in his class. And what does he teach right off the bat? He teaches Ikkyo.
Yeah. And that's
like, right, just like, when's the last time I saw him?
Yeah.
So
that's wild. Yeah.
I have a lot of different little stories where things have happened where I don't know how he knows these things, but his intuition is and his perceptive ability is very.
Yeah, very keen.
But
And I totally believe that. I totally believe it. I totally get that, and have been a benefactor of that too. And that, I had over across the years, I had had developed an affinity with the kids program. And I remember, would help out with it. I would assist with the kids and stuff because I love kids. And um, then it went, the kids program went through, as I recall, a bunch of transitions and ups and downs, and there were solid presences there, and then they would disappear. But then at some point, I sort of stepped in there, and I just remember Sensei being so supportive of that, or just really delighted about it. And then, like 16 years later, you know, there I still was, right? It was a glorious opportunity, and a real honor and a joy to have made a kind of imprint on that program for as long as I could, until I made the decision to make that pivot in my life and go back to school, and all of that.
I
But
was
yeah.
going to ask you, I didn't really know how you got into teaching the children's program, but eventually you were running it, I think, and
Yeah, that's what happened. Is I just
quite some time.
was running it. It was for about 16 years. And it was great. And we sort of fell into a rhythm eventually. It became because John Ottavino was running the program for a long period of time. And then for whatever reason, I think his life and work, he's an actor, and I guess, his life and work sort of took him on in different paths. Maybe he was just getting a lot more work, and this and that, and family life and so on. And so but he was a fairly solid presence, and I would come in and help when he was teaching. And then what started happening was that Peter Ki and Walter Gonzalez began to hang out more and more. And the next thing I knew, we were the triumvirate. Like, it was us. And then we had some really great people who began to come in, like Sarah Higgins. You remember her? She came
Yes.
for a period of time. She was a wonderful presence with them, and loved the kids, and all of that. And so that was we just got into a wonderful rhythm with that program over time. And it gave us a lot of joy, and it was a real stabilizing thing for me to feel like, because training was always, being able to come to the dojo was always an important thing. And even though my life's work, because I was working as a director, so that was pretty. I mean, you remember, I would go off and be out of town for weeks at a time, directing shows and stuff wherever in the country. But once the children's program sort of came on, it really provided a kind of obligation that you were moved to honor, because now it really was about these kids, and getting to know all of them, and also the parents, which was a whole trippy thing. And now I'm a college professor now, so I understand, like, parents are a trip. They're something to contend with. Now I don't have that as directly, but at that time there was no mediator between us and the parents. It was them. And whenever things were going on for them, or they were concerned, there you were. You had to interface with it and deal with whatever their anxieties were, whatever their concerns were about their little babies. And I totally got it. And so there was that. So there was a whole skill set there that I think was preparing me for later life, right? Yeah. So that was the kids program for 16 years. And Maya came through there for a period of time. Your daughter, she helped out with the kid when she started getting older. She helped out with the kids too, and she was wonderful.
Yeah, she actually couldn't wait to get out of the kids program because she really wanted to then graduate up into the adult.
Yes,
And
I remember that. Yeah,
she had to wait until she got to be a certain weight or size, and then
get into the.
She got very involved in Donovan Sensei's teaching. That, well, we all ended up. It was supposed to be the teenager class, but a lot of us ended up in those Saturday afternoon sessions, taking all the ukemi with the teenagers. When we could still kind of keep up with some of that.
But, yeah, absolutely.
And but yeah, she went through the whole Aikikai all the way up.
She sure did. She sure did. I was so proud of her, and just so astounded that she really did click in and make a commitment. And she stayed the course, and she really, because that's you're right about that. She was in the kids program for a long time too, but when she, you know, was pretty much grown up, she just it was almost like she had this real sense, because I knew she was special from the moment I met her, obviously, but she had that sensibility about of giving back, sort of, you know, paying it forward, or, you know, as that expression goes. And she would really, when she came and helped out in the kids program, there was a real dedication about it, because that was, I think, part of her rite of passage, right, into the adult program, was that she could come and help out in the kids program too.
Yeah, I think
it's different. Yeah,
in there, and you know, she's such a people person. So
she really is.
really
She
a total
is.
people person.
She really is. Yeah.
And now I know in her teaching, you know, she's teaching voice at the University of Alabama. And so I know she's incorporating a lot of her Aikido training into her voice teaching, into
Yes.
her somatic work with them, a lot of breathing and grounding center exercises. And
Which is
so she is using.
She's using it. And you know, Debbie, that's such a wonderful segue, because this whole thing, I think a lot about you. We've talked about this over the years too. Even though I left Aikikai to go and, you know, back to grad school and everything, I, you know, there's that whole thing about how it just stays with you. It becomes like a part of your core, and so I've incorporated it into many things. You know, it's whether it's negotiating with people or negotiating my way through difficult interactions with people, difficult dynamics, challenging things, that all of those Aiki principles around pivoting, moving, you know, just blending, going with something, or knowing how to parry and pivot and move, and redirect energy that you don't want here. That stuff has been invaluable to me, as a person who went back to school later in life, and you know, was grateful to have Aikido centering, because it lent me so much perspective about how to not suffer difficult people and situations. I've been so grateful for that, you know, and also its adaptive capabilities in terms of being sensitive to people with, you know, who are differently able, people who are challenged in different ways, and understanding how to adapt, being adaptive to circumstances myself as a person who has a couple of hidden disabilities, but also being sensitive to how that works out in the world, in terms of being sensitive to other people who have challenges like mine or different from mine, things like that. Have you found adaptability in those ways too in your life?
I think so. I think in terms of application, I would like to say that, oh, I'm good at applying Aikido to conflict resolution, or
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I've mastered that. I remember reading Terry Dobson's book, which used to be called Giving It to Get Your Way.
Yeah, I remember
all about applying Aikido in personal interaction or
I remember that book.
I'd like to think that I can do it, and I use it, and I think I'm getting better. For me, it was more like taking Aikido, you know, when I got really involved with horse riding, and I gravitated toward the pedagogy of centered riding, which takes Aikido principles and body awareness principles and applies it to horse riding. That was like a more direct application for me, a more direct connection with how we're using Aikido. And then those principles really clarified a lot of things in my own Aikido training. You know, the kind of things that we do at Aikikai and we learn through the School of Hard Knocks, but we don't really sit around and talk about and centering and real breathe, but we don't, it's not like, there's not a lot of big discussion on all these. And so for me, taking the centered riding principles and taking the Aikido into the horse riding and trying to, but you know, that's been frustrating because I can't bring my Aikido self always to my horse because it's terrifying sometimes. And I find it challenging to bring the self I can have on the Aikido mat from all these years, comfort knowing that those are only like 200-pound people, and these are 1,500
Massive. Yeah, it's a whole.
light animals, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
But it has helped me a lot. I know it's given me a lot of advantage in my horse riding,
Absolutely.
and now my, you know, after COVID and throughout COVID, my horse is a little too far away from me. So I've got her a teenager, and she has her own very talented teenager now who works with her 6 days a week, and that's a very, very good partnership for them. So
yeah, that's
my
wonderful.
horse riding time is a little on hold right now, but
Yeah.
then of course there's always the new partnership pursuit that I seem to gravitate toward, and now it's tango dancing, which
Wow.
is safer than martial arts and horse riding, I think, so far.
So far.
But you know, it allows me to make those direct connections between when two beings come together and make this unit, and
Yeah.
the beauty of, and being able to see the beauty of that, and I gravitate toward that. So that's my latest, but it seems for me, I've been able and lucky to keep my training going at Aikikai because I'm here.
Just
And
great. Yeah. And I have to tell you that I mean, one of the things that's given me a lot of just incredible pride is because I'm trying to, you know, I'm remembering back. I think I realized when I started grad school at NYU, that was before I moved out to California for the PhD program. I think I've been, you know, I sometimes the dates, you know, dates blur because after a while we're talking about a lot of years now we go back, right? But I think I got my fourth dan, which was you know, such an honor, and then I guess it was probably about somewhere between 5 and 6 years after that I made this decision to you know, change tracks. I had been contemplating maybe going into social work or, you know, doing that path. And then I kind of backed up and went on this other path. And I started with getting a Master of Fine Arts at NYU. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to have any additional time because it's so demanding. And so then, you know, the path took me on out to California. I did the PhD program, joint PhD program out there at Irvine and UC San Diego. And that I have no regrets about any of that. That has just been a really great thing. But I missed through it all, just missed Aikido a lot, and had the good fortune in those intervening years. I ran into a guy who was like a Nidan in, you know, not a USAF guy, but he was doing weapons work at like 6:30 in the morning with some friends of his. He was a physicist or something, this guy. And I getting his PhD, and I came across him and I said, hey, I would love to practice with you. And there we are outside, you know, surrounded by the mountains and everything, and in 6:30 in the morning doing weapons work. And that was as close as I could get to doing Aikido, you know, and I was glad to do that and found myself being really grateful to the work that we'd gotten to do through the years with Sugano Sensei, the late great Sugano Sensei. So just recalled a lot of that kind of basic centering that he gave us that really built upon all of the basic sort of implicit work that we've been doing all through the years with Yamato Sensei. It was all there. So I found, interestingly enough, people used to say, oh, you're in New York Aikikai people, you don't do a lot with weapons, but actually, you know, then you go ahead and you pick up a bokken, and lo and behold, you have a relationship with it that you may never have anticipated you'd have, right? So I did that for several years with this guy out there, and that was a really great connection. Anyway, flash forward all those years and the opportunity to move back east and everything, and of course, and reestablishing connection with my old friends and things like that. And you know, you all of you powerhouse women and men, you know, who just stayed the course. I mean, and you all are all, you and Laura and you're all like 6 dans now, and I'm like so proud of that. I'm just like, wow, look at that. And some people you have gone on like their 7,000. I'm like, I'm so proud of that. Like that's a huge testament to the state, like when people sort of stay the course with something. I'm not condemning myself because I switched tracks. It was absolutely right that I needed to do that. That was what I was, I have no regrets about the path that I went on. And, but anyway, it's just a really interesting thing when you have these interesting returns in life and you check in with people and you see the achievements that they have made, and to feel such a sense of, it's almost like I feel a retroactive investment in all of you that were in my kind of cohort, that just, I don't know, I can't explain it. I was just jubilant when I started to learn and realize that you guys were just up there,
Wow. Well,
Wow.
thanks. But you have like you're a Shihan of academia now.
Well, I don't know.
I
don't know.
I still want, after all the times you tell me of what your degree really was in, I think it'd be great to hear. Tell again, what you actually studied, because when you went out to California to get that doctorate, I
Yeah.
knew, and you went down the rabbit hole because I knew you were living in the library, and I just knew
Constantly.
you had your nose to the grindstone for like 5 years at least. And
Yeah.
then you took the fellowship, and
I
then
did a
it just went
postdoc.
on and on. And we're just now getting you back, and you're still super, super achieving, with finishing the book and all this stuff you do. And
Yeah.
so
Thanks. Yeah.
believe me, you might
Yeah.
not, you might have stepped away from the dojo a little bit, but
Mhm.
and I now I think you told me you did do that weapons work, but that's such a great story that you came
Yeah.
across that. And
Yeah.
also just have to say that, yeah, I would say for a long time at Aikikai, we felt, well, we don't really do a lot of weapons, but we all did with Sugano Sensei. We got such a basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even though now, and he wasn't big on kata, he didn't like to teach kata or set
Right.
forms. And so nowadays, even, all these, there are a lot of people who know a lot of katas and they
Yes.
know all these forms. And I keep thinking, well, I don't know the katas.
Right.
Quite
You need to
honestly,
follow
I'm
that.
not interested in learning a fixed kata. Maybe I should, but when I do pick up a weapon and do things with it, even I think I had to teach a Zoom class. I did a very little bit with
Mhm.
weapons, but for me, it is that
Same
the
thing.
weapon clarifies
What we already have had all
inside,
along.
what's inside of us, and
That's
our
right.
relationship. It's beyond just a form or holding. And again, it's that unification, like when
Yeah.
you hold your tango partner, or you hold the reins and sit and connect to your horse, or you connect to your
That's right.
Aikido partner. I find when I take a weapon, it creates this whole relationship.
And relationship, right?
And
Yeah.
what's so interesting that during Hal Lehrman Sensei, during COVID, he did a lot of work with the Jo. And
Yeah.
he's been doing a lot of teaching where you treat the Jo as if it were your uke, and so that you're sensitive
Wow.
to it, and then you use it as a self-examination or a teaching, so
That's wonderful. That's a great way
anyway, I
of
just
looking at
think at Aikikai, for us to have all of our, well, we have Yamada Sensei, we had Sugano Sensei, and all of our Shihan and our senior
Oh,
teachers,
yeah.
and some who are gone and
Yeah.
some we still have with us.
Wow.
I just,
Yeah.
it's a special,
Mhm.
I feel lucky that I have it. I had it
Yeah.
and I have it, and anyway.
Absolutely right. And here in Central PA, where I am, I'm trying to cultivate. Well, then COVID kind of hit the fan and put everything on hold, as we know. But my hope is that when it feels safe to do it again, I will be able to sort of cultivate some folks to work with. And one of the things I'm trying to cultivate, we were talking earlier about, these adaptations. I'm very sensitive to people who are older and who have disabilities and who are dealing with conditions like Parkinson's and so on. There are all these sort of partnerships that are developing with our how in New York you have that sort of Mount Sinai, monopoly. Here in the state of Pennsylvania, there's a big health system here called Geisinger. I guess it's something akin to California's Kaiser Permanente, those big, and there's a center here that is doing a partnership with Geisinger Health Centers, and I'm thinking about reaching out to them and doing some adaptive Aikido work, adapting to people who have special needs and for who, particularly like Parkinson's and other related central nervous system kinds of things, where it can really help. So doing that kind of some of our basic principles and concepts from Aikido, adapting them for people so that it becomes about something else, kind of therapeutic, a whole different kind of heuristic or mode of application of the art, something about that. Plus just trying to resume teaching at the recreation center here and on campus, on the Bucknell campus, where I teach, where I'm a professor, and those kinds of things. So I'm trying to get it back into my life and in my orbit when the time feels right again. But I have to say that when I reached out to Yamato Sensei and asked about that, he was just couldn't have been more supportive about it, and just said that that's a wonderful thing, and keep him apprised of how it's going, give it some time and see, and so COVID blew a lot of that up for a lot of us, but I'm looking forward to the next chapter of that, which will be really great.
Yeah, that's exciting, and I'm sure you're gonna do it. But I think it's great that you're in this environment where you're not like, I'm here in New York. We have York Aikikai. I'm not saying I couldn't go out and teach, find a place to teach,
right.
But I really respect that you're looking for ways to give back.
Yeah,
and because not everyone is ready to come to get on an Aikido mat in the dojo, but yet there's so much benefit to everything we do that maybe doesn't involve falling down and hitting the mat.
exactly. There's so much more to the art than that, as we know.
And I know Harvey Sensei has, I know he's not experimented, but he has had some classes where he's teaching people he doesn't let them or ask them to fall down for the first 3 months, I think he told me, to take away that level of fear and get people a certain confidence. So I think people who have either smaller schools or are in a setting like yours have an opportunity to
do things, adapt like that. That's really great. That's really great. Yeah, I'm not surprised that Harvey Sensei would be attuned that way at all, and so that's really great to hear and to know that he's attuned like that. And I'm so I'll see, I'll keep you posted. But that's something that I'm hoping to pursue once we really get past this new concerning phase of COVID, which is we're all so ready for it to be done, right? But we've got to wait and see how this all goes.
Yeah, I mean, we're still training together, vaccinated.
Yeah, folks. Yeah, which is
some
really
people, more people are starting to wear masks. I was just talking to some people about, do we think we'll continue? I hope we do. And even if we're wearing masks,
masking, whatever you need to do to make sure that you have that extra layer of
just
safety.
So thankful to be back on the mat after,
action.
For me, that time of
long.
It was long, and I'm not sure what to say about COVID time. I got through it, and I mean, and we all got through it in our own way,
in our own different ways, and
so Aikido helped me, but more indirectly, I think, not with the actual
Yeah.
doing so many classes online, or
Yeah.
it's just a more personal
Right.
way of applying myself. But
What it's become, because that's the thing about it, doing, having a connection with something for so long. It's astounding how it informs our intuitive intelligence for I mean, it's the gift that keeps on giving and giving and giving, because I feel like I've never lost my connection to Aikido, even though I haven't actually been in the dojo in years, but it's amazing how it just is in me that way, you know what I mean? And in the sensory responses to things, and
yeah,
the carriage of myself in situations that feel maybe not the safest in certain ways. I'm not talking about being in actual literal physical danger, but spaces that are questionable in one way or another. To have that have become such an innate, organic mode of response and anticipation and all, is I couldn't trade for anything in the world.
well, during COVID, everyone started talking about social distancing, and
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
talking about my.
Hi. That's
But
right.
you'd go out on the streets of New York, and were a lot of people who don't have any awareness
That
of their physical
way to
space.
come out. Yeah.
So
Physical space. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was interesting to go out,
Yeah.
and also just to, we're used to scanning the environment and
Yeah.
being able to. I felt very lucky that I had that skill, because sometimes you would go out to walk with people who
Just kind of
they
oblivious.
just didn't know they weren't anticipating what was
No,
happening, and it
I know.
felt, but so
It,
we used our Aikido during.
that's right.
We still are. It's like,
All the time, right? Yeah, exactly. And you all a lot. But in any case, I'm just like really thrilled and so impressed that you and Sharon and Laura, I mean, it's just the whole cadre of the folks that I treasured so from way back in the day are just still tuned in, and that just means a lot to have found that out, you know. So I don't know. I guess, I mean, so here we are now. I mean, we're in well into the 21st century, and I mean, you've still stayed very much a part of an immediate part of the Aikido world. How do you see Aikido in terms of what is your observation about how it's fitting into the larger scheme, in terms of how it's moving forward, and what you think it's going to like mean to the whole thing about passing on legacies and how to do it. I'm off here in central PA trying to, as I was saying, to figure out my own patchwork to trying to carry the art forward. Does New York Aikikai still feel like a hub that's kind of alive and well in terms of the
yeah,
carrying on of the art and people
yeah,
picking up on it and going, continuing
yeah.
along?
No, to me, it does, and it's. I was saying to one of the newer students, we haven't had Yamada Sensei home with us for such a period of time. He's not really traveling because of COVID, and I think
Oh,
he had been trying to slow his travel down. He'd
yeah.
been promising to stay with us more, and he kept accepting a lot of invitations, and COVID really forced him to, and now he's here and he's teaching, and I find his teaching is just really inspiring right now, just really focused and really inspiring. And
Wonderful. Yeah.
I think that the feeling at the dojo is, I think everyone being away from the mat during COVID, and then when we came back, not that we didn't appreciate it before, but I think everyone is just very appreciative that we can
Yes.
actually touch each other and share
That's the thing.
Aikido. And I think Aikido, it's like every group of people that I've ever been involved with, when one of the big leaders passes on, there's a splintering of people who want to claim their power and claim that they're the inheritors of the lineage. And I've seen it in a lot of different areas of my life. And with Aikido, I think as the Shihan pass on, I think it's important that we recognize that part of Aikido's power is in its tradition. I mean, in the tradition of respect that we have for our seniors and respect that we have for our teachers. And I guess I'm traditional and conservative in that way. I just feel that there are certain things about Aikido that might irritate, it's a Japanese art. It's a male dominated, or has been male dominated. But it has this very strong tradition. And I like to take what I like from Aikido and use that.
Mm-hmm.
I chose a traditional Japanese martial art. And even though at the time I chose it, I was thinking, I'm choosing this because it's so beautiful and it looks so fun. And I want to do it for my own growth and self-development. And then it took me many, many years till I had to accept that, okay, I'm doing a martial art. This is a martial art, but it's an art. It's not a sport like judo.
Right.
It's really an art. So I guess I'm saying that I hope that there can be more coming together with all of us in Aikido than there will be splitting apart, because I think even now there's splintering happening out of USAF. I know, that's not a secret. And I'm hopeful. I think that Aikido itself, taking what we're doing together as kind of a model. But then I'm idealistic about everything. So I'm idealistic about this too. But I'm hopeful. I think Sensei now is really focused on leaving and giving a legacy. His legacy is undeniable. He's given us everything, and then look at the world of Aikido and what he's given.
Oh, well, I mean, that's, undisputed. I mean, he's just an extraordinary teacher and one of the people who brought Aikido here, and yeah, that's not a question. It's so interesting. I mean, I think you and I may diverge somewhat in terms of how we see, we both agree and I think diverge a little bit. I mean, I'm a kind of I'm a scholar artist, and I've learned the principles of immanent critique, which has to do with recognizing the strengths of something. I mean, you really were alluding to this, the strengths in things, but also troubling things, also trying to open space for where the participants in something can also be interlocutors in it, can also pose questions about it, or can say, how might this atmosphere or this environment, or how might this context be more inclusive, or how for us to be in a 21st century world and not question male domination is, I would say, is problematic. But you and I, we've known each other a long time. We adore each other, and we can disagree about that. But that doesn't mean that we both don't see what is rich about. I've always taken as a given that at the heart of this is the Japanese tradition, that this art it comes from Japan. There's no getting around that, and there's no part of my practice and thinking process was always around how do we practice a Japanese art respectfully and also not, also not, what not I'm losing my word here. There's a word I'm looking for. Not be exploitative of it, or what's the word? When people take there's an appropriation danger. There's the word I was looking for. There's a danger of appropriating anything that comes from an originary culture. And so how do we respect, as you're kind of suggesting, the originary, the origin of something, and also evolve aspects of it, and that evolution is not about improving upon the origin of something, but we bring ourselves to it, and we bring who we are to it. So it becomes different. And if we have perspectives that are different, then the art itself, whatever it is all the better for those different interlocutory perspectives being welcomed in that environment. You know what I mean? I've just come to think that way because of my, who I've become across the years. And that Aikido and its principles have never impressed me as being, and those principles have never impressed me as being mutually exclusive. That's the beauty of Aikido.
No. Yeah.
That very.
I don't think we disagree at all.
Yeah.
I don't really think we have a disagreement, but you're much better at expressing it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should tolerate any kind of inappropriate or abusive, but I'm just acknowledging the fact that there are more men. That's just a fact. There are more men training in this martial art. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Yamada Sensei's attitude, he has done nothing but cultivate women and their training. And I think some of the other women who've been interviewed in this series or spoke to each other in this series really talked about in the early days, they didn't feel different from the men in a way. They just felt like they were all training hard and enjoying Aikido and following sensei. And I'm sure there was a lot of stuff that happened that wasn't, who knows, but
yeah, people have these kind of like one-on-one or individual encounters. That's all part of it too. Sensei talks about it on one of his interviews in this series, that the unavoidable reality of personality differences and the ways in which training brings that out. And we each are kind of on our own in a certain way to negotiate some of that. And we have the good fortune of having an art form that's developing a core of pliability, being pliable, being supple, up here too.
Right. And I think women have such an advantage in a way learning Aikido, just because
we do. Yeah.
We can't necessarily kill people.
Yeah, upper body our way out of a situation. No, we cannot.
Really have to develop something, but
that's the irony of it all, is that it came from a man of very petite stature. Sensei was not a big person at all, and yet he had a vision of something that was extraordinarily expansive, and that's the word, expansive. And so it doesn't, and so in so many ways the irony that we're kind of touching on here is that it does suit itself very well to people who are of maybe, if anything, smaller stature, or who are not physically gargantuan in any way. We have an advantage. I think that's built into the art. And it was a man who founded the art, but so all of that is true. I mean, all of this stuff that you're talking about is really true. But I also, one of the things that I always appreciated over the years about Sensei was that he was so, seemed to appreciate all of us in all of our different, there would be no reason to, we just are all different. And our temperaments are different, our sensibilities are different. And that brings to bear our perspectives on, you know, issues that affect the world outside. You know, and this conversation we've been having is so much about the applicability of Aikido principles to the world outside. You know, I'm a Black radical scholar. I'm doing critical Black studies in my work. And so I'm dealing very directly with anti-Black violence and the murder of Black people. And when it gets to the point of spectacular, you know, the spectacular, how do we think through these things? How do we struggle through these things? And how do all of us up in the ivory tower actually communicate with people on the ground who are doing activist work, in very, you know, in harm's way many times. You know, so, you know, Sensei always knew whatever it was we were doing. And back then I was just doing theater and navigating that, but he always seemed to understand intuitively that whatever our life's work was, or whatever the engagements were that we had outside, that we have this intuition building, you know, tool that is always applicable in one way or another to whatever it is we're doing. And that to me communicated a sort of welcoming of all kinds of different, you know, I'm the kind of, I interrogate everything now, you know, and I try to do it imminently. I try to do it generatively, but I ask questions, I critique things,
Mhm.
I say, what is this about? What's going on here? And I would never, ever have thought in my days at Aikikai that would have been anything but welcome, you know? And so that's where I'm at, you know?
Yeah, Sensei really lets people develop, you know.
Yeah, we become
He,
who we
he
become.
gives you, even Sugano Sensei once said, you know, we offer it on a platter and it's up to the student to take it.
Take, leave, whatever. Yeah.
And I just think, you know, Aikido exists without any of the personalities, or there is Aikido, and it's
Mm-hmm.
this, how do you create a moment of harmony? You know, how do you navigate in all the different spheres of our life and in the dojo, in society?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is, we're going to have to learn about people in our Aikido world who have different ideas about maybe how things should be done, or are angry that, I don't know what they're angry.
Whatever,
That it's not more,
mm-hmm.
I don't think Aikido can suddenly become like the Me Too movement, or I just don't think the way it's going to work is that there's going to be a confrontation. It's going to have to be resolved somehow through.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Aikido is its own little world. Yes, it's also part of the,
Also, yeah,
you can't really separate it, but
right.
I guess that's what we're dealing with, is how to really take Aikido principles back and forth,
Yeah,
and integrate and be able to use it. You know, these are bigger problems.
Well, yeah, they're much, exactly. These are huge problems, and so I think what I'm taking from what you're suggesting is that, I mean, I think Aikido absolutely does lend itself to because I think it becomes whatever we each make it, you know, also because you if you walk into, you know, when you go on and you begin to, you take the principles, you have the blessing of your teacher to take up the training wherever you are, if you can't be in New York anymore or whatever, and you or in a different space, and you have an attentiveness to particular things, then your Aikido practice becomes it incorporates what your principles are. So if you want a practice that is accessible to, you know, like sensitive, like we were talking earlier about sensitivity to differently abled people, if to a sensitivity or a cognizance about things that involve kinesthetic force tending to magnetize male energy a lot, and you want to become, and you're sensitive to the fact that you want to welcome women so that you have then Aikido, I think, welcomes you bringing that to it if that's who you are and how you know what I mean? So it gives us a fundament. It's a fundament that we have. And then whoever we are sociopolitically or in terms of whatever our cognizance is, I've always had the sense that we're welcome to bring who we are to this extraordinary art that teaches that kind of suppleness. It is open to any and all of that has been always my thought. Do you know that? Am I making any sense? I hope that's.
Yeah, I think so. I think that one of the most important things you touched on is that it's developing our intuition. And
Yes,
we may
absolutely.
not be aware of that, or we may not think, well, what is intuition? It's you know, the ability to adapt and react without analyzing. It's something.
Yeah, and yeah,
So
or to bring
I,
both eventually to bring them
yeah,
together.
yeah,
To
yeah.
bring,
But I think the first impulse is of intuition. It comes out of you naturally from all your life experiences and all your
yeah,
training. So
yeah, yeah,
I think that's a hopeful thought that we're all in our own ways. We're becoming more sensitive and more intuitive and able to.
yeah. You know, I mean, absolutely. And I think if we can bring intuition and analytics together um, in the ways in which we apply Aikido to whatever it is that we do, then we're all the better for it, you know, um, is what and that's where I'm, you know, what I'm hopeful about is to try to bridge those two things in some really thoughtful or useful way, you know. But then again, we just said everybody who comes to Aikido is all different. We have different points of view, different perspectives, and different ways that we apply, you know, the art. Um, so I totally hear you. And I think I completely agree. The gift of intuitive development, the ability to feel and have sensibilities that jive with our surroundings and all of that, I couldn't have been better served by another. I mean, the what Aikido has gifted me in that regard, I wouldn't trade for anything, you know. And now I feel like it's my job or my responsibility, more than a job, but more my obligation to bring those linkages together so that I can take this art and apply it in ways that bring my ethics and principles to bear in how I, you know, pay the art forward in whatever ways that I do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky.
We are.
I've known each other for so long, and I think we're very lucky that
Yeah.
that we had this chance to share this with each other.
Absolutely.
And you know, I watched all the previous videos, and I couldn't believe how much I learned about people I've known for almost 40 years.
Right?
So
Yeah.
I found out things today. I found out a few new things about you.
Likewise, likewise. And that's a real gift too, because it is true that when we're, you know, on the mat, we have this one way that we know each other. And that's a really extraordinary way to know people. There's a real intimacy to the rough and tumble kinesthetic contact that we have with each other. But then, yeah, people have lives that they go out into and modes of thought and perspectives on the world and, you know, all of that stuff. And so you're absolutely right. And one of the things I treasure is having really what have become lifelong friendships that have sustained over time, and the ability to have reunions with folks. And what has come with that is also the losses that we've had to share in these last couple of years, the profound losses of people in the Aikido world. And that's been tough. That's been really sad and all of that. But on the upside, we have these incredible friendships that you blink and one day you've known somebody 40 years, you know, or longer, you know, for the real old timers before us, right? who are still with us. They've known each other a whole long time, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Well, I'm looking forward to, we can continue our
Absolutely,
chat in the
absolutely,
future.
absolutely.
So,
This has
I
been
think-
wonderful, Deb.
Yes, Dr. Jaye. I'll call you Dr. Jaye.
And you are Sensei Debra.
Well, I think they're ready for us to wrap it up. So
Yeah, okay.
thanks for sharing. And
Thanks so much for this. Yeah, this has been a real gift. Okay. Bye for now, I guess we say.
bye for now.
Bye for